What is it that makes an esport successful? This is a question that a lot of people have been talking about over the years, something that's especially true in more recent years with esports blowing up to the near mainstream levels of popularity they're currently reaching. Later this month, Overwatch has its competitive mode coming out, and with the game already seeing a few tournaments even before that, some players are wondering whether or not it's going to join the Leagues, Dotas, and Counter-Strikes of the world as a top esport, myself included. My mind has been pretty busy with trying to keep up with all the sports and esports stuff going on right now between Copa America, the Euros, and LCS, so I thought it might be a good opportunity to discuss what I think it is that truly makes an esport last. The first myth you run into when discussing this kind of subject, I'd say, is probably when a lot of people say all you have to do is make a fun game and then you can turn it into an esport afterwards. Like, if you have an enjoyable enough game to draw a large audience to play it, then all you really need to do is set up an infrastructure like a league for top play, and you're going to have your viewers and your esport. But I'd say this isn't necessarily true, and to see why, all you really have to do is go back and take a look at Slam Ball to see why this isn't necessarily the case. For those of you not privileged enough to see this great sport in action throughout the 2000s, Slam Ball was basically a basketball meets trampolines kind of sport. Anyone who's played basketball on a trampoline knows it's incredibly fun, and it's sure as hell enjoyable to watch, but sadly this great sport wouldn't survive throughout the years for whatever reason. On a more serious note, I don't think that having a game or sport be fun is all you really need to make it competitive. This is something that's obviously debated quite a bit, but here are my 2 cents on what I think it is every esport needs to succeed. The first thing you need to worry about is making your game accessible. This is probably why a lot of console games don't balloon into hugely popular esports. In the US, where console culture is a much larger thing, there's been a few competitive games that have blown up in the past, namely stuff we've seen through MLG, like Super Smash Bros. Melee, Halo, and Call of Duty. Halo in particular was something that I followed religiously growing up and enjoyed playing myself. But these games have all had a really big problem that they've struggled with: what happens when there's a sequel? Every time a new iteration of your game comes out, you split your audience as an esport. It can obviously have a pretty huge negative effect on pro players, where if pro players don't like the new gameplay, the new maps, or the new mechanics that come with the next Call of Duty, you could lose pro players that end up quitting the game, or see players whose skill isn't fully developed. But even if you just think about it from a fan's perspective, which is arguably more important, you can see a bigger problem. Every time you release a new sequel, you leave some fans behind. If the fans don't like the new gameplay, if the fans can't afford the new game, if the fans can't afford the new console the new game is played on, each and every time you have a sequel that comes out, you leave a little bit of your audience behind who isn't ready to move on from the old game, and you end up losing a bit of your viewership, hemorrhaging old fans more so than you're bringing in new ones. There's some games that have been able to survive these divides and splits, particularly Super Smash Bros. Melee, which is still played competitively to this day, but even Melee took a huge hit when Brawl came out and has only survived over the years due to its incredibly unusual and unique gameplay that you can't really find anywhere else, almost as if it's a standalone game. Having accessibility to your game, having just one version of it, one version that people can play and play and play over and over and over, developing their skills, getting really good, showing off to their friends, having it be really accessible to everyone, being either cheap or better yet free, and updating it with balance changes throughout the years is a really important first step to setting yourself up for success. The second thing you need to take into consideration is simplicity. This is probably the biggest single reason traditional sports have lasted for generations. Dad can always explain the goal of football to his son in a single sentence. Put the ball in the back of the net. Move the ball to the end zone. Have you ever thought about how simple almost every popular sport is? So many of them just involve taking a ball or sometimes a puck from one end of an arena to the other. This makes things incredibly easy to pick up and play yourself and really easy to watch as a new spectator. Everything might get a little complicated and complex at higher levels of play where you have all sorts of strategies to worry about, but even in the more complicated sports like American football, everything is basic enough that you can always explain it and play with your kids. You even have specific rules in American football to make the game as viewer-friendly as possible to new fans. Like, you're not allowed to have any advertisements on players' jerseys, no ads on the field. Everything you see when watching an NFL game is specifically put there to help you know what's going on and to let newer fans get as good of an understanding as possible. Video games don't really have to worry about this too often right now. For the most part, esports know they have a really young and smart audience playing their game, so they can add a lot of complexity without losing too many fans. But if something really wants to last for a serious amount of time, keeping it simple and easy to explain with a solid basic rule set is key. And finally, the one thing I don't believe people think about often enough is an esport has to be fun to watch. Most competitive games know by now that the fans and viewers are the really important thing they need to succeed, but a lot of games don't worry about making their esport enjoyable to view. Like physically enjoyable to watch. Whenever you're watching a traditional sport, you can see with your own eyes just how much effort and strain is going into every player's actions. They're doing things that you marvel at because you know 99.9% of human beings aren't physically capable of doing that. Being able to show through the gameplay just what it is your pro players are pulling off is a really important thing that isn't really taken into consideration that often. In my opinion, esports stuff should always come second. It should come after making a good initial game, but there is a lot to take into consideration if you want your game to be competitive. When people talk about Overwatch and whether or not it's going to balloon as a competitive esport, I think it's important for Blizzard to recognize that all the hype around it currently isn't going to keep the scene alive forever on its own. That's a true statement for virtually every new game looking to make a competitive splash, and I do hope a lot of people remember it. Anyway, I hope you guys all enjoyed today's little rambly video. I'll see you all in tomorrow's new video, but until then, thank you very much for watching, good luck in solo queue, and have a wonderful day.